Hey guys, SC here. In a video I made not too long ago, I showed everybody how to use VoiceMeeter Banana, as a virtual mixer in order to be able to channel your stuff around within Windows and shape the sound of each of those sounds of each of those things that you want to channel around in order to improve your audio setup. If you haven't watched that video yet, you need to go ahead and stop and watch it now. I'll put the link below in the description because this video you're about to watch assumes you've already watched the first VoiceMeeter video. And if you watch them out of sequence, you're going to be lost. So watch that first before we even begin. If you've already watched that, here we go. What we're going to do here is we're going to extend upon VoiceMeeter a bit. We're going to introduce VST plugins that you can put into VoiceMeeter pre-fader, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. But basically, it's going to go out. It's going to send its sound out to another program, and then that program is going to send it back in before it even gets to these controls. So it'll be able to, well, do whatever you decide you want to do with it, because there's a lot of different VST plugins available. It's just a matter of what you can find. In this particular setup, I'm reducing background noise and changing the sound a little bit on my microphone in order to help out and make it sound a little bit better. Now, in the example that I'm showing you here, I couldn't do this live with my own machine because at various points where I do it, if I just did it with the live machine, it would cut out. So in this particular instance, this example, I'm showing you a virtual machine which has a null driver put into it. So I can go through the steps here, but you're not going to hear anything out of this setup. Everything you hear is going to come from my live system, which already has the changes. So watch it, but keep in mind, if you don't hear anything change immediately whenever I click something, that's because I'm not on my live system. This is just using the virtual machine. All right. Now, first thing we want to do, as always, is we want to go ahead and download what we're going to be using. For the plugins themselves, I'm going to download what's called Reaper plugins, or ReaPlugs, which is part of the Reaper program. Reaper itself is a program you pay for. The plugins, however, are free. So if we open up our Microsoft Edge browser here, because that's exactly what everybody uses to browse these days, correct? We'll go to the Reaper page. Again, these links will be in the description. However, if you look at this page here, if you see this, you know you're in the right place. Go down and download the 64-bit version. This little tutorial is going to assume you're using a 64-bit version of Windows. If you're using a 32-bit, well, one, you might want to upgrade, and two, just adjust what you're hearing and what you're seeing for the 32-bit version. So when I tell you to go download one, if you're using a 32-bit version, that's fine, go download that instead. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll be working with 64-bit plugins. And if you have a 64-bit system, then you should be working with the 64-bit plugins as far as I'm concerned. Let's not complicate things. If you're not sure of what kind of setup you've got, go over here to your Start button, right-click it, and hit System. When it comes up, it'll tell you 64-bit operating system. Boom, there you go. Now you know which one to download. You're going to download that. Once you're done with that, these don't work on their own. They need what they call a host to be able to insert them into and run them. There's a bunch of different hosts out there. A lot of them are actually excellent to use. Some of them are even easier to use than the one I'm about to show you. However, this one, Cantabile, I'm hacking that up, I'm sure. But that program, that right there, is the one that I've noticed that works best with all the plugins that I get. Because I've gotten some others free through my Focusrite interface, or if I use them with a lot of other plugins that are recommended, like VST Host or Minimod or something like that, they actually crash the host. This one doesn't care. It plays everything that I've thrown at it, which that's exactly why we're going to use it. And since this is set up like a lot of different audio programs that you'll run into, say like Avid Pro Tools first or Regroover or something like that, it'll look similar once I get it all set up. So what you learn here, you'll be able to immediately take it to another audio program and work with it, with minimal learning curve. All right. So right here, we're going to go scroll down, click on this thing to download. I know you saw up here where it said purchase. Don't worry about that. The Lite version is free. You just have to register and get a license first. So obviously, download the thing, get all the programs installed, install Reaper, which is a straightforward process. One of the things I will tell you as you install Reaper is if you can remember it, fine. If not, you need to remember where Reaper installed its plugins. So in this case, go to Program Files, since it's 64-bit. If it's 32-bit, you'll go to x86. Actually, if you're using a 32-bit Windows, it'll only be Program Files. So go to Program Files, go to VST Plugins, go to ReaPlugs. Easiest way to do this, left-click once right here on this little folder thing right here, and it'll highlight that. Right-click, copy. Keep that. We're going to need it. All right, get rid of that. Start your install on Cantabile. Once you do this, it'll ask you eventually to register for a license key. You can't go any further until you do it, and it's a very straightforward and quick process, so go ahead. It'll ask you for your email, a password you want to use, whatever, and it'll send you a key in the email. Once you get that email key, throw it back in here and continue with the program. It'll ask you what type of license you want. You choose the Lite version, not the Pro version, not the regular version, just the Lite version. One, we don't need everything installed with the other versions right now, not for the purposes here. And two, they cost if you use them past 30 days. So with the Lite version, it's free, no time limit. Let's just work with that. Now you notice I stopped midway through the install process because I wanted to go through all of this stuff with you here. So it's going to say welcome. Before starting, there are things that need to be configured. The audio driver you want to use, audio ports for extending the microphones and speakers, MIDI ports, which we're not going to be working with MIDI at all, and the location of your plugins. See, told you that we were going to need that. So let's go ahead and hit start, or next, excuse me. That's going to ask you for an audio driver. For the purposes of this, we want to point it at VoiceMeeter. So you notice it's already highlighted, but we're going to look in the thing here, and notice there are 3 different VoiceMeeter ones. One of them, however, is special, the VoiceMeeter insert. That's the one we want. If we don't choose that, we're screwed right off the bat and nothing's going to work right. So select the VoiceMeeter insert virtual ASIO. Once you have that, it should come up with the sample rate and the buffer size that you selected in VoiceMeeter. Not a big deal. Just later on, if you have trouble, just make sure that it all matches what you did, which it should. Hit next. It's going to ask you for audio ports. Basically, we're just working with the microphone right now. So microphone, speakers, that's fine. Speakers is just the out that's going to go back into VoiceMeeter, so we can work with that. Metronome, you can keep it there, you can delete it, you can do whatever you want. It's not going to hurt anything. We're just not going to use it. So in this case, let's just go ahead and get rid of it. That way we don't have anything extra. We're just working with what's right here. And you notice for each one, just a simple left and right channel. All right, we're good. Hit next. And keyboard on extra. These are MIDI ports. Okay, we're not going to be using any of these. Just uncheck them all. We're not going to be using them. Hit next. Now it's going to ask you where your VST plugins are. Remember where I told you to copy that thing a minute ago in the File Explorer? Now we're going to right click and we're going to hit paste. And presets and banks, I think it defaults to your documents folder. I didn't even set anything here and it works fine. So Just leave it there. If it really bugs you, hit browse, select a specific place you want to put your presets and banks in. That kind of goes beyond the settings here. We're only going to be messing with one preset, whatever we set up here. So just leave it blank if all else fails. We've got our VST plugins here. This is blank. Hit finish. It's just scan the VST plugins. And you'll notice now we have a very basic window. We have one thing here for input ports, one thing here for output ports. That's exactly what we should have. Now, in order for this to work with VoiceMeeter, we have to tell VoiceMeeter to change something. So bring up VoiceMeeter, click on its menu, and from the menu, go down here where it says System Settings and click that. Now, most of these system settings we went through in the last video. However, the ones we didn't go to are down here, patch inserts. That's what we're getting into now. The only ones we're going to be using are in one, left and right. And in one refers to the hardware input 1. If you wanted to change it for hardware input 2, we do in 2. And so on and so forth all the way down. There are plenty of different things. We could add plugins for every one of these. And I would not get anywhere near that. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole right now. We're just going to keep it simple. So we got our main microphone input set up here, hardware input 1. We're going to enable those. You will notice, not on here, but you will notice on your own system that with Cantabile running, when you click these and enable them, you're not going to be able to hear anything from your microphone setup anymore. That's it. You're not going to hear anything yet. That's because we haven't set up Cantabile yet. So it's kind of like not having the chain. There's nothing linking from one to the other yet. We're going to get that set up now. When we got these lit up, everything's done there. Just close this window and minimize VoiceMeeter. Keep it open. Now, let's go back here. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit here. Again, input ports, output ports. Okay. First of all, we're going to add a route. So we add the route from, got to change the input port. We don't. New route from main microphone. That's our main input. So yes, that's where we want to go. And from there, at the moment, we got nothing but the speakers set up. So if we hit this, now, it's not going to do it here, but now you'll be able to hear it through your speakers. It just works. Okay. Now, we got this, it links to this, and from here, it goes out to VoiceMeeter. We kind of need something in between. So now, we add our VST plugins. Now, you can sit here and just add stuff all day. You want to kind of have an idea on the order that you set up everything. So I've been playing around with a few different plugins, and I've been playing around with the order that they go in. And this is the order that I found that works best for me. In this first case, we're going to add an EQ. The reason we're adding that is so we can knock out certain sounds that are annoying us, maybe hums that are coming from fans or something that's coming from outside. So that's for simple knocking out. A more complex one will come later. So we're going to add object. We're going to add a plugin. See how we got all this stuff here? There's one here that's called ReEQ. Double click it. Boom. It's right in there. Now, we're going to change this. See how we got our output port to the main speakers? Change that now to the ReEQ. We're going to reset the chain. At the moment, the output port goes to main speakers. Not a big deal. Now, you have no idea how to set all this stuff up. There are dials and all sorts of stuff in this line, and I'll tell you right now, we're not going to use a single one of them. Relax, we're good there. See where this thing says ReEQ standalone? Double click it. Now we just get into the regular setup that Reaper expected us to work with, which is fine. So if we look at this, there's a couple of different things. I just pulled up the one for my live thing. So, and actually, I could pull that down so you can see it. This is my EQ for my live system, what you're hearing now. Normally, if I didn't hear all these in here, there would be a bunch of noise right in this area. So there were specific things that I did with it to knock it out. Each tab that you see refers to one of these dots. So let's look at dot 1. It's way down here in the corner. So the frequency was at 20 hertz. I had something on that really low frequency that was bugging the ever-living hell out of me. So I set it to all the way down to 20 hertz. So I put it right about there. So it was in the middle. You know, you'll look at this little peak thing here, and you can guess. You can kind of get a guess on where the peak is. So if it's right there, then you can look right in here and get an idea on it's probably 125, maybe here. And you can just use a visual representation if you don't want to nail it exactly. But here, I guessed it to be 20 hertz. So I took this dial and I just leveled it all the way down. And if you don't want to use the dial, you can actually type it in right here as well. 20 hertz, no problem. Now you'll notice gain I didn't mess with. That's because we're not just lowering it. Normally, like over here in our virtual example, you'll see it says low shelf. Low shelf literally means drop off everything. So if I were to hit this, it's going to try to drop it off all the way down. And I'm not really doing that. So we'll just put that right back. In this case on my live system, I went all the way down and then I changed it from low shelf to notch. And what notch does, I explained this a little bit in the EQ that was built in the VoiceMeeter. Notch will take that specific band and just try to knock it the hell out. Reduce everything as much as it can. Which is exactly what I wanted to do. Now you'll notice it doesn't do it in a straight line. Like I said in the last video, it does it in like a V formation, like a curve. And you can adjust that V formation with this bandwidth thing here. In my case, 1.56 worked for me. It produced the best solution as far as getting rid of not just that particular noise, but to get rid of its runoff on each side. Now, if I wanted to extend it, I could extend it all the way out. If I wanted to bring it all the way into where it was aligned, I could do that. But 1.56, I'm going to put it right back so I don't lose it, was the sweet spot. So that was for that particular noise. Go over here to number 2. Here's another notch. Apparently there was another noise at 120 hertz, which was, again, bugging the hell out of me. I can tell you right now, that was the system fan that was just blaring through these things because I have a lousy mic. So again, set it for 120, hit the notch, knock it out. We could actually do this automatically with the next plugin that I'm going to introduce, but that's going to be a problem, and I would explain that later. Right now, this is just to get rid of your major annoyances, your big things that are constantly in the way and just driving you nuts. Hums, noises, everything of that nature. So notch for number 2. Go over here. Let's skip number 3 for a minute and go to number 4. There was another little high-pitched noise at 898 hertz. So again, brought it all the way up. And you can notice there wasn't much runoff on each side, so I got it knocked all the way down to where it's almost a line. That way, the less you knock off, the less of other things are going to be affected as well, because 898 might be a sweet spot for a lot of people's voices, you know, and something like that. If you notice, a lot of my voice is coming in on the lower bands, so knocking out those lower bands actually affects my voice. And we're going to have to work with that later. But in this case, like I said, 898, changed it to notch, knocked it the hell out. Went back over here to 3. Apparently, I still had a large bow right here where I still had noise in the background. And if I stay really quiet, hold on just a second. you can notice there's something still there. So I couldn't knock it out completely, but I tried to do my best. So I put it to number 3. As you can see in that little line right there, brought it to 128, which was the peak of that. And I can't just notch everything out of here and knock it out, because then I wouldn't have much of a voice left for you to hear. So I just set it at band, and then I brought the gain down a little bit, where it knocked it down to where it was almost gone here, but it didn't take everything out, so I still sounded like I had a pair to me. You can adjust that however you want, and that's not the only options. That's just notching and banding. There are low shells, high shells. You can go to low pass, high pass, which will knock out some. All pass, which I wouldn't suggest it. Band pass is another one. It's funky. I wouldn't use it, but maybe you have a use for it. Lots of different ways you can do this here. As far as the low passes and the high passes, I'm handling them in a different plugin. That's why I didn't set them up here. Excuse me. Okay. We've got the presets on this. And I'm going to knock this out of the way real quick. We would do that in this system, however you wanted your system to be set up. Again, notch, see how it sets it up by default? And then you can change it up to here, and then maybe number 4, we'll set it to notch, do something similar way up here. Set it to where it's similar to what my system is. So let's just say that works for everybody. All right. Your mileage will vary. Again, just watch. You'll be able to see a visual representation here. Stay quiet. See if there's any peaks there, any major ones. If it's only popping up every now and then by a little fraction of an inch, that can be handled in the next plugin. That's for minor stuff. For your major stuff, stuff that's going quite a bit, that's what this is for. Cut out the major stuff. Once we're done with that, hit the X. We'll have that all set up. Then we're going to add our next plugin. Our next plugin is going to be called Reaper ReaFir, standalone. Double click that. Now, I'm going to pull up the one from my live system and show you something. Where is it? There it is. And I'll bring it over here. Now this shows you a little more graphically what all these sounds are that you're hearing. Now you'll notice, excuse me. Now you'll notice that I have a red line here in addition to the yellow lines that you're seeing. That red line represents what I cut out. This can be used as an adaptive noise cancellation system. What that means is we can set this to listen to the ambient noise in the room, and then it will automatically try to get rid of that ambient noise and nothing else. Sounds good, right? All right. I'm not going to do it on this system, but give me a minute. I'll pull it over here. Got our Reaper. Let's double click that. And we'll see a very similar window. However, at the moment, it's set to EQ mode. We just did an EQ. We don't need that. You're going to set it to subtract. That's the mode we want. So, in order to use this in subtract mode, you would keep your mouth shut and hit this checkbox for about 10 to 12 seconds. Obviously, it's not going to hear anything here because I don't have a driver in place, or don't have an active driver in place. It's a null driver. But 10 to 12 seconds with this checkbox. And then you would uncheck it. And when you uncheck it, you're going to see something similar to what this window has. You're going to see that red line. Now, there are some how-tos out there that I've run across that simply use this plugin and this plugin alone. That's great. It will try to cut out everything. All that stuff that you saw before that we poked and prodded at, it will try to cut out as well. However, the more it cuts out, the more it does so automatically. Remember when we originally hit the notch button, how it was a wide V? Well, this, you can't adapt to that. It just does it on its own. It adjusts itself to whatever it sees fit. So when I tried to use this by itself, and now I went to try to use it in Discord, immediately everybody was sitting there going, what the hell is that? You sound like a robot. What the hell happened to your voice? Well, that's what happened to my voice. If we don't get rid of the stuff out of that EQ first, before we go to here, and if we just use this on its own, chances are it's going to cut out too much and your voice is going to sound messed up. Another thing I would point out with this particular setup, once you get your subtract mode set up, and once you get it here, there are three ways this could go. One, it could sound perfect. Your voice sounds great. You don't hear the background noise. Everything is great. That's a best case scenario. Two, you're cutting out. You're every time you talk, it sounds like you're talking through a fan or something like that. It's just nasty. That cutting out over and over and over again, multiple times, per second. Well, if that happens, you need to increase your FFT size. Now, be careful how far you increase it, because the more you increase it, the more it kind of distorts the audio a bit, so you sound more robotic and stuff like that. There's more echo in it, things of that nature. On the flip side of that, if you do hear that where it's sounding echoey, where you sound weird, you sound almost robotic, you may need to lower this to a lower number. The lower the number, I've noticed, the better the results. However, on a lot of systems, put the number too low and it starts cutting out on you. It starts getting distorted and nasty. So you just have to play with the sweet spot as far as FFT goes. So in my case, 4096 represented the sweet spot for me. If I did it any lower, it got nasty. If I did it any higher, it got weird. So play with this, hit subtract, hit this checkbox 10 to 12 seconds, and then uncheck it. You have to uncheck it or else you're not going to hear a damn thing. All the other stuff, leave it how you see here, precise, all this stuff. If it cuts out too much for you, don't use it. It's not a must that you use this particular plugin. If it bugs you, don't even bother adding it. But this is one way to get rid of everything that you see here and just have your voice. That way you're not having to fight all day with EQs and stuff like that. This is a really nice thing that I like. It just tends to be overzealous where it's too hard. Now you'll notice in both of these plugin setups, the output gain has been set to 0. Some people will lower it, some people will raise it. If you lower it, don't do it here. Do it over in the EQ. In my case, I left them both at 0 because I wanted to work with that later. The more we work with in the beginning, the cutout. Now that I've cut out a lot of this stuff, if I didn't have the other plugins in place, my voice would be really low in volume. So I'm going to have to jack it up later. Well, I want to jack it up later without jacking up all this other stuff. So we want to make all of our changes early. And then as we go on, we work with expanding. So that's why I set these up in the order that I did. So we have our EQ that removed all the major stuff. We have this, our Reaper in subtract mode. Reaper sounds weird, but I'll just work with it. Our Reaper in subtract mode, set up to get rid of all the background noise. That's great. Close that out. We're going to reset this one because I didn't want to work with it. And you're done. Now, remember we got to set up the chain again. You might not even hear anything until you do that. So, stereo out. Set it to Reaper. And Reaper's already set to the main speakers. That's good. No problem there. We're going to knock this down here because we got more to do. All right. going to add another object. So the next object, we're going to add a plugin. This is going to be ReaComp. Now, be careful, because there's 2 ReaComps, or at least there were at one point. Yeah, there's a ReaComp and there's a ReaXComp. The ReaXComp we don't want, because that gets way too complicated. We're just going to do the regular ReaComp standalone. Alright, we got that. Just to play with it, just to make sure, let's just set this now. Output port, ReaComp. I think I may have just entered the wrong one. No, I got the right one. That's weird. Alright. Should be stereo in 1, not stereo in 2. I'll look at that in a minute. Give me a second. Okay, yeah, it does the same thing on my live system. Had the check. Alright, once we got that, it goes to ReaComp, stereo in 1. The output port goes in the main speaker, so we've got the chain going here. We're going to double click on ReaComp. And here's your standard setup. I'll bring up the one for my live system here. And this is ReaComp. And I just forgot what compressor. It's a compressor. Basically, what this means is we're setting it up to where you're going to hear my voice at, for the most part, a set level. And not anymore. So if I start looking at a screen, if I'm getting owned in a game or something like that, and I just start screaming into this thing's going to make up for it. See how that red line right there? I'm basically eating the mic at the moment because I can't yell. So as I get louder, this thing is compensating. And it's going to lower my voice back to, so everything is constant, so you're not getting your ears blown out. Trust me, it's a good thing. So there's a few things I'll go through in each of these things. Threshold, that should be a pretty self-explanatory one. Anything past whatever you set here is going to get knocked back down. So what I would do in this case is push this all the way up at first and then just talk normally and get an idea visually of where your normal voice is. And then maybe set it for just a little bit above that. So see how in this case 30 is about the norm for me. So I've got it set to negative 29, which will bring it just above that. So as I talk, some of it's going to get, adjusted, some of it's not. But as I get into it and really yell into this thing, it should adjust it back down to where everything's staying the same, or at least most of it. So, what's all this other shit? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, we got pre-comp. What that means is, as you're talking, you're basically setting its zealousness, zealotry, whatever you want to call it. So if you wanted to pre-comp this for 10 milliseconds, whatever, it would start to cut in even sooner than it would normally would by 10 seconds. In my case, 1 millisecond produced perfect, results. No problem there. The attack, that's where it's normally kicking in, 5 milliseconds after it starts noticing something's messed up. So its default was 5, so I just left it there. The release, again, I have it set as the default at 100 milliseconds. That is the point after it starts sounding normal to it again, when it's going to stop knocking stuff, down. So at this point, the default worked fine for me, so I didn't mess with it. The ratio. The higher you hit this ratio, the more it's going to attack whatever loud sounds you throw at it. I found that 16 to nothing works. I believe its default is 1 to nothing. So 16 to 1 was fine. I've seen other how-tos set it at 20 or even 25 to 1. It's just how much it's going to attack it once it gets beyond that threshold. 16 to 1 seemed to work out for me well. Do too much of it and it will sound muddied, in addition to being lower. and you don't want that. So you don't want it to sound like somebody's putting a hand over somebody's microphone or something like that. You don't want it to sound distorted. So that was the sweet spot for me, 16:1. Knee size, I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what that is. And when I tried to look it up, I didn't see anything. So I played with it at 0. I played with it all the way up. It didn't change anything as far as I could hear voice-wise, so I just left it at the defaults. You'll notice the defaults are right here. This is what I have it set at. So play with it however you see fit. You can't hurt anything. We can always just set this back to default. That's no problem there. So let's look at detector input. Should probably never be touched. It's at main input left and right. You can change it to other stuff, but it's probably going to mess stuff up. Just leave it where it is. Main input, left plus, L plus. For whatever reason, if you decided you only wanted to do the left side or the right side, there it is. But for what we're doing, probably not the best idea. Now here's where we get to our low pass and our high pass. And I did this in the next 2 plugins just to make sure. But in this case, we're doing anything beyond what I've set here is going to be knocked down. Kind of like the notch, except for we're doing it for everything from that hertz onward. Now it's not going to get completely knocked out, but it will knock out most of it. So in our case, it's a microphone. We're not working with cymbals here. We're not working with, high-end, bells and stuff like that. So we're not going to want to pick up really high sounds. So I set it for 15,000 hertz. Anything beyond that, it goes off. Why did I set it for this? Because a lot of hisses and things like that could come from, air conditioning units, things of that nature, could go higher than that. And if it were to kick in and for whatever reason you heard it, that's the band you'd probably hear it at. If it didn't hear it there, you probably notched it out already. Same on this other one. They call it a low pass. I look at it in the opposite direction. So the low pass is going to get rid of everything after. The high pass is going to get rid of everything before. And since I had a lot of issue with different sounds on the really low range, I set mine for 100. You may not have to do that. You may have a better mic than me. At least I would hope you have a better mic than me. But if you do have issues with a bunch of sound on the low end, this is one way that'll help out a lot with that. Anything under that is getting attacked, 16:1. Same up here. So that's another way to knock down that stuff a lot. But, that's even after what you processed before. This is just to be safe. I could get rid of all of these and you would still probably not hear most of it. But adding these puts a little extra in there to where you're really not going to hear when, say, my ceiling fan cuts on because this thing listens to the ceiling fan. Or up until recently when my dog was walking across the room in the kitchen, this thing would actually pick it up. So using these will help out with that a lot. RMS size. Kind of like knee size, I changed it back and forth. I didn't notice any difference, so I left it at the defaults. Same over here. Output mix. In this case, I did notice a little bit of a difference. The dry noise, to me, brought in more of the background noise than the wet. So in this case, the wet brought enough sound in to where I really didn't need the dry. So I set the dry all the way down, kind of like what they have here in the defaults. And actually, to be honest, I left it at the defaults. I thought I changed it at one point, but I didn't. So you may notice a difference. Drop your wet all the way down, bring up your dry. See what you hear differently. If you like it better that way, set it up that way. That's the whole purpose of this. Set it up however you see fit, whatever sounds best to you. Beyond that, down here, preview filter. If you're listening to it and you want to hear what it's sounding like, by all means, click it, and you'll be able to hear everything. Auto makeup didn't make a damn bit difference for me. It didn't, like the knee size, like the RMS size, check it, uncheck it, it didn't change anything for me. Down here, limit output, again, didn't change anything, along with AA. So this may be for your more really sensitive stuff, like when you're doing guitar work or something like that, which has really sensitive inputs that don't have a lot of, you've got to really amp them before you even hear them. So that's the comp. Now once you set it up, once you talk, you start yelling, people are going to hear the difference in your voice, but their ears aren't going to get blown out by what you're doing. So that's a nice thing to have. So we cancel that. That's what this is here. We just showed you what everything is, so I'm just going to leave that alone. There's one more we're going to add here. In addition to the compressor, we're going to add a gate. Now, some of you may already be familiar with what a noise gate is. We're going to look through here. We're going to see regate standalone. Double click it. It's going to be put here. Go to stereo out. Up here, the one above it. Change its output port to the regate. Stereo in 1. Done. Its output port here goes to the main speakers. You're good. So, I'm going to open up regate. It's going to look very similar to your recomp you just did. And I'll go up here and double click mine and bring it on down. And this is the difference between the two. Regate, for anybody that doesn't know, what's going to happen is it's going to listen for a specific point. In my case, negative 49.1 decibels. Once my voice gets louder than that, my mic's going to cut in. So if I keep my mouth shut, hold on for just a second here. See that? At the very bottom, there was background noise still. Hold on. Now, because my gate is in place, it's below that line, so you're not going to hear it. And that's a good thing, trust me. So once it gets above that certain point, it's going to kick in. Once that sound gets back below that threshold, it's going to cut off. So that's if you have a noisy environment, that is a perfect way. If you can't get any of the other stuff to get rid of all of it, this is your last step. This will cut out whenever you get below a certain threshold. So for some people, this is the only thing they use. In OBS, there is a plugin just specifically for this and its audio setup. Problem is, we're setting this up for everything, not just OBS. Try again. So you want to be able to have a plugin that works everywhere. There is one technically in VoiceMeeter, but there's no options to change it. So if it cuts off the end or the beginning of you talking, that doesn't really help you, and it doesn't really sound great to everybody else listening. So this is where we do this. You'll notice I don't have it set at the defaults because I want to change that sort of thing. See this pre-open here? Like the compressor before it, pre-open is going to go at this thing a little sooner than it normally would, by 10 milliseconds. And doing that allowed this thing to work to where it heard all of my sentence. That way, my first syllable didn't get cut off every time I talk to you guys, which I prefer that if at all possible. The attack, from what I understand, the attack is how quickly it starts working. So technically, I suppose I could have adjusted it here instead of here. But leaving it the default here seemed to work, and just adjusting it here, because this seems to adjust a lot higher than me going backwards with the attack. The hold, this working with the release allows me a little bit. This keeps it up at a certain level for exactly that long. Again, I probably could have used hold in lieu of release, but release has a lot, it goes a lot farther out than hold does. So attack and hold, you're not going to really worry about so much. What you want to worry about in this case is pre-open and release. Pre-open you use if the gate is cutting off the beginning of your talking, and release is the one you adjust if it's cutting off the end of your talking, or if it's keeping the mic open for too long after you talk. If you want to trim that a bit and make sure that it's cutting off exactly when you stop talking, then you knock this the other way. You knock this number back down. You'll notice in the default, it's set for 100 milliseconds. In my case, it's set for 300 milliseconds. So it was cutting off the end, which is exactly what it did when I used VoiceMeeter. So this works a little better. This gets everything. The hysteresis. This is another one of those things where I tried to look it up. I couldn't find anything. And adjusting it didn't really do anything one way or the other. So you can play with it, but to me, it doesn't really seem to make a difference as far as vocals go. So detector input is the same as what it was over in the compressor. Leave it at main input, let L+R. Again, if you wanted to do just one channel, that's great, but that's outside the scope of what we're doing here. You'll notice again, we have a low pass and a high pass here. The low pass and high pass over here are for 20,000, pretty much the end, and 0. That's the ends of what this thing can monitor. In my case, since I wanted to focus on the vocals, and since I had a bunch of noise on the low end, just like the compressor, I set it for 15,000, and I set it for 100 down here because I had a bunch of noise on the low end. And it's not perfect. If I keep my mouth shut like I did earlier, you noticed there's still a tiny bit coming out. And there's nothing I can do about that. Not without screwing it up, majorly. This is the setup based on my little bit of experience that seemed to produce the best effect out of my microphone. Again, we have this wet, dry, and no. Why you would want noise in it, I'm not sure, but hey, whatever works. Again, dry, I brought it up. I didn't like the way it sounded. The wet sounded better. Turned it down. Left the wet way it was. I'm trying to get rid of noise, so I'm not even going to mess with this. You do what you want with it. Preview filter output. When I hit this, it sounded like it bypassed everything here. So hit it while you're working with everything, and then hit the, while you're working with these here, and then hit it again to actually, hear it and see how it works. Kind of almost sounds like it's backwards. This should be like bypass out, filtering. I don't know. Invert gate. I know there's a purpose for it. I don't know what that purpose is because I'm not an audio expert. And it kind of sounds like something I don't want to use. And when I hit it, it didn't really make a whole lot of difference in this. It did make some, but I didn't like the way it sounded. It made everything sound muddy. Didn't want it. Leave it unchecked. These MIDI channels and whatnot, if you know what you're doing and you know how to work with MIDI stuff, by all means, work with it. I don't, so I'm not going to mess with it. So these are my settings. You can adjust them over here, however you want to see, however you see fit to do it. At this point, we now have all the little things that we want to work with. And they're going to work in this order, from the EQ to take out the big stuff, to the subtractor, which is going to take out as much as the little stuff as possible, to the compressor that's going to keep us from blowing everybody's ears out, while at the same time working a little bit with getting rid of the rest of the stuff, and the regate, which is going to just use our mic when we want it used, and on the back end of it, do one more step to try to get rid of as much of that noise as possible. Now, you may run into a situation to where you use this, and then you get to the subtractor, and you don't have any more noise to get rid of. Nothing. It's perfect. You got a great mic. Everything works out great. You got a silent room or whatever. In that case, you don't need to use these last 3 dials at the bottom on either one of these. Leave them at their defaults, where they're at now, and just work with the rest. In my case, I use this, I still had a little bit here, so these actually help out a little bit. Set them however you want. Once you have these set up, as long as the chain is set up properly, where it says going from the microphone to the EQ, to the reefer, to the comp, to the gate, to the output port. When you go on the VoiceMeeter, let me pull mine up real quick. This is my Cantabile. This is what it looks like. And you'll notice everything is working here. So, you can tap the mic, do whatever, as long as you see stuff here, that works. One thing I will point out, if the levels here are too low and you don't want to work with this at all, see this last little line right here? This is the master output gain. This is applying gain at the end of this entire chain before it ever gets back to VoiceMeeter. Remember when I told you, when I cut everything out here, it made the volume of my voice and everything extremely low, to where I've got to jack it up in multiple places to get it up to the point where you can hear it. This can help in situations like that. So if you notice after you're working with everything that you're still hard to hear for people, you can apply this to try to get a little kick and get everything in there. Let me move this out of the way. You can see this is working. And if I move this out of the way and I bring down my VoiceMeeter, you can notice that it is indeed, everything's working there. You see it in B1 and B2, your outputs here, everything's working. And you'll also notice, because of my mic and how bad it is, I've got it all jacked up all the way up so you can hear everything. At this point, if you still sound, if your voice sounds tinny or something like that, go up to IntelliPan here, awesome feature, and adjust it to the left. Go up and down however you see fit, but adjust it somewhere to the left and find your sweet spot where it sounds good to you. After that, minimize your stuff. You're done with that part of it. I'm going to show you one more step so it works automatically. Right now, if you followed my tutorial to the letter last time around, you went over here in VoiceMeeter and you checked on System Tray, Run at Startup, so where you don't have to worry about whether this thing's going to start up or not. It's just there. Well, Cantabile Lite doesn't have that feature. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell Windows to start it up automatically. Oh, wait a minute. Skipped a spot. Before we even do that, we got to save this. So we go over here and just hit Save Song. It's going to ask you what to save it as. Put a whatever here. Streaming, whatever. You'll notice it defaults to documents, like I said before. Hit Save. And then one more thing we're going to check. Go to Tools. Go to Options. See where it says Startup and Shutdown? Make sure that this is checked. Reload the last used song. That way, you don't have to tell it every time it starts up what to pull up in order for everything to work properly. It will just work. Needs to restart to apply some changes to the setting. Restart, that's fine. It's going to restart. Boom. Everything's just going to work. Now, there hasn't really been anything changed. All your settings are still there. And because you saved it and applied those settings at startup, they will stay this way whenever you restart the computer. That's exactly what we want. Here's the problem though. How do we get it to restart with the computer automatically? Well, that part's built into Windows. Easy enough. Go over here. Now this is different on a lot of different versions of Windows. You can search for it in the control panel. Easiest way you can do here is just click on this thing here and start typing. Type in the word task. And see where it has Task Scheduler? That's what we want. We're going to pull that up. We're going to maximize it here. And you're just going to go over here and you're going to hit Create Basic Task. Hit that. It's going to ask for a name. And I'm going to say that word that I keep hacking up, description. You don't have to put a description in, I just do it. Got that all set up like that. Hit next. We're going to say when you want it to start up, when you log on. Every time you log on, that's when you want it to start up. Hit next. What action do you want to perform? Obviously, start a program. Hit next. Well, what program do we want to start? Here's where we got to figure it out. Now, if we click on this start button over here, we can go to, it did not, okay, Cantabile. Make sure you're looking at the 64-bit one here. For 32-bit guys, obviously do something else. But for 64-bit, right click here. And then you're going to go to More. And then you're going to go to Open File Location. Now here's the weird part. This is not the file, so don't just click up here and choose that, and that's not it. This is just a shortcut. Right click the shortcut. Go to Properties. See this part right here that's highlighted? That is exactly what we want. We want every bit of that that's highlighted. If for some reason you click on it and it's not all highlighted anymore, hold down the Control key and hit A, and it will all be highlighted. Right click, copy. Done with that part. We can close that. Back to this program. What do we want to run? Right click, paste. That right there is what we want to run. No problem there. So hit next. And everything's set there fine. At log on, start a program, no problem. Finish. Done. It will start up the next time you start your computer. If you want to make things even easier, which I probably shouldn't have closed it, let's go back over to Cantabile real quick, to that shortcut. With this, right click, More, Open File Location, right click, Properties. Real quick, this shortcut, just change one thing. Where it says Normal Window, click this, hit Minimized, hit Apply. You will need the prior, yeah, I'm assuming you're the administrator for your own computer. If that's not the case, this tutorial is going to be problematic for you. So just hit Continue. Everything's in it. You'll see it now says Minimize, hit OK. That way, when you start up the computer, it's not going to pop a window on the screen. It's just going to minimize and stay down here on the system tray. Same way with VoiceMeeter, it's going to stay over here. Everything's going to stay out of your face. It's just going to work. When you want to change things, you just open up Cantabile, whatever, and change whatever's it. If you want to add inputs, let's say you wanted to change, you got hardware input 1 all set up, no problem. Let's say you wanted to add some special effects to hardware input 2 or whatever. You would just go right over here into your system settings, enable your patch inserts for that particular input, and then repeat what we just did with here. It's going to be a whole new chain. So where it says your input ports, we're going to have new input ports and a new input chain. You're just going to work with it. But that's outside of the scope of what we're doing here. This is just for the microphone. And now, using this setup, you can go in here and adjust your EQ. Use subtract. Check this for 10 seconds. Cut out everything you don't want in the background, your ambient noise. Use your compressor and make sure that people aren't getting their ears destroyed. And set up your gate to where it only cuts in when you want it to. That way, no push-to-talk necessary. Go over here when you're done making changes, save song. Done. And that is this whole tutorial. If you follow it the way I just showed you, everything will work, and you will have not only a custom mixer, which will allow you to do a lot of different, routing back and forth and shaping in and of itself. You will also have the ability to further shape your audio and add effects into specific channels of what you're working with. So if this worked out for you, if you like it, hit that thumbs up below the video. Give me a comment. Let me know how it worked out for you. If there's problems, tell me. I'll try to work it out. And that's this video, guys. I hope you enjoy.